Jerusalem is the most important city in the world, but its history began right here on this small ridge opposite to the Temple Mount. It may not look impressive today, but beneath this ridge lie layers of history reaching back to the second millennium before current era. This is the city of David, the legendary stronghold of King David, which would become the capital of all Israel. A small Jebusite settlement around the Gihon Spring, with its fortress of Zion and imposing walls, would one day become the city where God dwelled. But first, it had to be conquered. How did David conquer the Jebusite city? A mystery and a legend for centuries, until the discovery of an impressive network of Canaanite tunnels shed light on a single, long misunderstood word in the Bible. This network of tunnels, together with the Gihon Spring, holds the answer to why David chose this small ridge to build the capital of Israel. The Jebusite city was perfectly situated, with an access to the Jordan Valley and far closer than Hebron to the northern tribes of Israel. It became a strategic stronghold from which David launched his successful campaign against the Philistines. One battle after another, David crushed the Philistines, and by the end of his campaign, all 5 of their major cities had become vassals of the great king of Israel. Today, we continue the story of David and discover how modern archaeology confirms the incredible events recorded in the Bible. After this episode, you will never read your Bible the same. Let's begin the amazing journey together. So guys, this is gonna be a second part of an episode I did some time ago about the life of David on maps. If you haven't seen that episode, make sure to check it out. I will leave a link in the description of this video. So guys, let's just summarize where we finished the last time. We ended up in a critical point of Israel's history, the battle that happened in the Jezreel Valley between the forces of Saul and the Philistines. The Philistine forces were victorious and Saul had to retreat to Mount Gilboa, where he is slain with his sons. The next day, the Philistines take Saul's body and hung it in Bet-Shan. Then the brave people of Yabesh sneak up in the middle of the night and took down the body of Saul from Bet-Shan and took it back to Yabesh, where he was buried. But the death of Saul had much bigger consequences than just Israel losing its king. The Philistine pentapolis, Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath, were stronger than ever, and now they were not only controlling the lowlands, but also, because of the victory of the battle with Saul, they controlled the territory around the Jezreel Valley. This was a devastating news for Israel. Let me explain why. The defeat of Saul and his forces created a situation where the Philistines dominated the fertile valleys, whereas the Israelites settled in rugged highlands. But controlling the valleys gave much more opportunity for development and trade. And the Philistines exploited their location, mastering sea trade and dominating the routes to the northern empires, while the Israelites were isolated in the mountains. Here you can see the distribution of the land between the 12 tribes of Israel. And the Philistines were a major obstacle to many tribes to fully control the territories that was given to them by God. And now, due to their victory over Saul, this situation got even worse. But that's not all. After the death of Saul, Israel was divided into the house of Saul and the house of David. So at this point you have 2 centers of power, where David ruled from Hebron with Joab, his commander, over Judah and Simeon, and in the north, in the city of Mahanaim, you had Ishbosheth, who ruled together with Abner, his commander. Who is Ishbosheth? Well, he is the son of Saul that survived, but he is a weak ruler, and as we will see, his rule will not last long. So this is where we begin our episode, where Israel is internally divided and the power of the Philistines is rising. Certainly, this is not an easy time for David, but he receives a word from Adonai that he should go to Hebron. David leaves the territory of the Philistines that was a haven for him when Saul was chasing him, and now goes to the key city of the tribe of Judah, Hebron. As the young leader settled in the city of Hebron, the people of Judah came and anointed him the king over all Judah. And this is one of the most important moments of David's life, because now the prophecy given to the patriarchs that Judah, your brothers shall praise you. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. According to the prophecy given to the patriarchs, it was from the tribe of Judah and not Benjamin. Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin, but David was from the tribe of Judah. He was born in Bethlehem, and now he is crowned in Hebron over all Judah. By the time David is crowned, Hebron is already a fortified city, but it has very ancient roots because Hebron is the first piece of land that is owned by the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is where Abraham bought the cave of Machpelah from Ephron the Hittite to bury his wife Sarah. Later, Abraham, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah were all buried here. And today you can find the cave in the modern city of Hebron located in Judea. King Herod apparently built an enclosure, a haram, around the cave to remember the patriarch's tomb. This is how the building looks from a bird's eye view. Later, the enclosure was transformed into a basilica during Byzantine rule, and eventually during Muslim conquest of Hebron in 638 CE, the basilica was converted into a mosque. Now, because of the Muslim conquest of Hebron, this site is shared between Muslims and Jews, which results in a division of space and special access rules. One of the major restrictions, the section known as the Hall of Isaac and Rebekah, also called Ohel of Isaac and Rivka, is primarily reserved for Muslim prayers the majority of the year. Jews are only allowed to be there on few occasions. In reality, the Jewish people can be in that place only 10 days of the year, which in my opinion is ridiculous. This is one of the most important places for the Jewish people, and their access is restricted to this very important place, where, as we mentioned, so many patriarchs have been buried. Now, this is not the first time this is happening, where you see the most important place to the Jewish people being occupied by a religion which developed much later, so Islam. We of course see the same thing in Jerusalem, where the Temple of Solomon, the Temple of Herod stood. Now, on top of that, you have a mosque. This is something that's very troubling. But let's continue our story of David. I just wanted you to understand how important Hebron is in the story of David. One of the first things that David did as king was surprising. He sent a message of blessing and gratitude to the men of Jabesh Gilead for honoring Saul, the very king who had once sought his life. But while David ruled in Hebron, a rival kingdom was rising. Abner, Saul's powerful commander, crowned Saul's son Ishbosheth as king over the northern tribes, sparking a tense divide in Israel that set the stage for a coming clash between the house of Saul and the house of David. Now, it is important to understand that this is a serious challenge for David. He's just controlling 2 tribes, Judah and Simeon, while the other 10 tribes are loyal to Ishbosheth. So next we read about the first battle between the 2 houses. Abner leading Ishbosheth men and Joab leading David men met face to face at the pool of Gibeon, each army positioned on opposite sides. Abner proposed a combat between the young warriors, and Joab agreed. 12 men from each side fought hand to hand, killing each other at the same time. By the way, a giant pool was found in Gibeon, and some believe this is the one where this epic duel happened. But because the duel was not decisive, the real battle started. The army of Joab fought the army of Abner. It was a fierce combat, but the victory was on David's side. At a certain point, Abner and his forces started retreating, escaping from Joab. The chase continues until Joab agrees to leave them alone. And then, both armies return to their home cities. We read that Joab's losses were minimal, including Asahel, to whom we will return in a moment. He lost 20 men. In contrast, we read that the warriors of Joab killed 360 of Abner's men. So, if that isn't a clear indication on whose side God was, then I don't know what would be. Anyways, during the battle there's this chase going on, where Asahel chases Abner. And Asahel is a really fast guy. He chases Abner. Abner says, "Back off, guy, or I'll kill you," but Asahel doesn't. So Abner has no choice. He spears Asahel through his stomach and kills him. This becomes important in the next chapter, so remember this event. Back in Hebron, we learn more about David's personal life. And boy, there's a lot to learn about. So apparently David is a popular guy because we learn about his wives and his sons. So here it goes. His first wife, Ahinoam of Jezreel, who gave him the son Amnon. His second wife was Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel, and she gave him the son Caleb. The third was Maacah, the daughter of Tamai, king of Geshur, and she gave him the son Absalom. Look at this guy's hair. The fourth was Haggith. She gave him the son Adoniah. The fifth was Abital. She gave him the son Stephaniah. And the sixth one was Eglach, and she gave him the son Itram. Man, I can barely fit them all on the screen. But I told you, David was a popular guy. Okay, but jokes aside, this is how it was back then. If you wanted power, if you wanted influence, you had to marry other people's daughters. That's how you gain influence. And this is what David is doing here. This is also how the author of this book shows the success of David, especially if we contrast it with what is happening in the house of Saul. So while David is having all these women, right after that we read about a disagreement between Ishbosheth and Abner. So apparently Abner has an eye on a former concubine of Saul. And Ishbosheth doesn't like it. It's a woman that belonged to Saul, and he's saying, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? This girl belonged to my father. How dare you?" And Abner replies even more angry, saying, "How dare you say to me anything? I gave you the position you are in, and now you challenge me?" After which Ishbosheth is afraid to say anything more. But again, you can see the contrast. David is having all those women, while Ishbosheth isn't able to even keep one woman. So the story is clearly showing us that first, David wins the battle, and now he is successful with the women. He is the rightful king for Israel. But it seems the damage was already done, because now Abner promises to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul to the house of David. The kingdom that will involve both the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah, from Dan to Beersheba, so the entire land of Israel. And if you look at the map, those two cities that Abner mentions are significant, because Dan is the most northern city of Israel and Beersheba is the most southern city of Judah. Anyways, Abner is done with Ishbosheth. He sees he's not a material for the king, and he decides to contact David directly, saying, "Hey David, I have the keys to the kingdom. You want it? I can help you." To what David replies, "Alright, that's a good idea, but you have to bring Michal, the daughter of Saul, with you when you're gonna come and see me." And this is of course the woman that David truly loves. This is the one he killed 200 Philistines and gave the foreskins to Saul as a show of his love for Michal. This is the one he wants. He had other women for influence, for power, but this one he wants, at least for now. But there was one serious problem. You see, Michal was given as a wife by Saul to another man. Nevertheless, Ishbosheth, of all people, gives orders to take her away from her husband and give her to David. This really shows how weak at this point is Ishbosheth. And we have a little bit of a comical situation here, because as Michal is taken to David, her husband Paltiel follows Abner and Michal, weeping all the way until somewhere around Jerusalem, when Abner tells him, "Go home." So he does go home. Additionally, before the meeting, Abner makes sure that all the other leaders are on the same page and they will also support David. Here it seems that Abner has no problem in convincing them that David is the right guy for the job. He does, however, arrange a special meeting with the leaders of the tribe of Benjamin. Why Benjamin? Well, because the first king, Saul, was from the tribe of Benjamin, and because of this, the tribe of Benjamin had a lot of power among the other tribes of Israel. And of course, the current king, Ishbosheth, is the son of Saul, but at this time, he is a very weak leader and just a pawn. So Abner met with David in Hebron to pledge the support of all Israel, sealing it with a feast and departing in peace to unite the nation under David's rule. But then Joab learns what has happened and he's not happy. So he sent messengers for Abner to return. And when Abner returns, then Joab stabs him in his stomach, just as Abner stabbed his brother Asahel. Now, Joab was a complex and ruthless figure. He was fiercely loyal to David, yet often acting on his own sense of justice and ambition. Here, it's understandable. He didn't like Abner because he killed his brother. But here, he almost put the future of his leader in jeopardy, because Abner was the leader of all the tribes. When David learned that Joab had murdered Abner, he declared his innocence and pronounced a curse on Joab's family for the bloodshed. Grieving deeply, David wept at Abner's tomb. The people of Israel saw David's sincerity and understood he had no part in the killing. So, an event that could have led to a disaster showed a caring heart of the leader, and the people loved it. Chapter 4 tells a very gruesome story of the end of Ishbosheth. Banach and Rechab, who became part of the tribe of Benjamin, sneak into Ishbosheth's house and killed him as he was sleeping. Next, the two bandits cut off his head and thought it would be a good idea to give it to David. But as we saw in the encounter at Ziklag, David is furious and he orders them killed. They are killed, their hands and feet are cut off, and they are hanged in Hebron. With Ishbosheth dead, all the tribes of Israel came from all over Israel and gathered at Hebron. They acknowledged David as their true leader chosen by God, and then anointed him king over all Israel. Finally, after 7.5 years of his rule in Hebron, David is now king of all Israel. At this point, David is 37 years old. And the first thing that David does as the king of all Israel is gathering his troops and conquering a new city. A city that was not conquered by Joshua, but a city that will become the most important city in Israel's history. A small Jebusite city that David decided to conquer. Why did Joshua and the Israelites did not conquer the city? Well, because it was really well fortified. And not only it was fortified, it was also situated on a ridge, surrounded by valleys from all sides. No wonder the inhabitants of the city felt confident that David will never conquer the city. They shouted to David, "Even the deaf and blind could protect this fortress." Just looking at the city of David today, you can imagine the challenges that faced David warriors. Here you can see the location of the city of David, and as we mentioned, it is located on a ridge surrounded by valleys. If we look at the city of David from the Kidron Valley, we can understand the magnitude of the challenge. So I am now looking at the city of David from the Kidron Valley, and you can see how steep it is. But there is one more location, you may say, from which the attack could happen, and that's the north, where the Temple Mount is located today. Well, that would be a good guess, but recently the archaeologists in Israel made an amazing discovery. You see that red square on this footage? This is the Givati parking lot. There used to be a big parking spot there for people that wanted to visit the old city. But then they started digging and they couldn't believe what they were finding. Because the site has revealed continuous settlement layers spanning from many periods. Iron Age, First Temple period, Persian, Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine, early Islamic, and later. And guys, they actually found people that are mentioned in the Bible. Like for example, this small seal bearing the name Natan Melech. And who was Natan Melech? Natan Melech was an official carrying out religious reform of King Josiah, the direct descendant of David, the David we're talking about. But what is important for our discussion here is that if you look at this archaeological site from the road that separates the Temple Mount from the city of David, you will actually see that this is a huge hole, and the archaeologists have actually found a moat that was separating the city of David from the Temple Mount. Let me show you on my model how it would look. So here you can see the city before David's conquest, and you can see that it's sitting on a ridge. But from the north, there was a cut into rock moat that was created for protection. That moat continued to exist even in later periods, and there probably was a bridge connecting the city of David with the royal complex and the temple complex. So now you can understand why the inhabitants of the city were mocking David and his soldiers. They were feeling pretty confident. By the way, you see this pyramid-shaped structure? This is the so-called Milo. We read about it in the very book we are discussing, the story about David. And this is how it looks today. What does archaeology say about it? Well, excavations of such archaeologists like Yigal Shiloh and Elliot Mazar confirm that this structure was built in Middle Bronze Age era. In other words, the Milo was here when David wanted to conquer the city. But how did David achieve that? How did David conquer such a well-fortified city? The most amazing thing about it is that we always had the answer. We just didn't know about it. So, in the verse that talks about the conquest, there is a clue. We read that David says, "Whoever smitheth the Jebusites and getteth up the gutter." The Hebrew word that is used for the gutter is quite unique. It's tsinor. Here you can see I'm highlighting it, but tsinor. And if you paste that whole thing into Google Translate, you will get an answer in a tube. So tsinor is just translated tube. And if we put that word in ChatGPT and ask him what could be the translation of this word, we'll get a few answers. So again, the word gutter shows up, but also drain, shaft, water shaft, and also others, such as weapon, for example. But what is clear is that this word is extremely rare. And we must also realize that Jerusalem today looks very different than it used to. Here, for example, you can see in an old photo of Jerusalem before the city of David was discovered. That's right, when the Ottoman Empire ruled this area, nobody knew where the city of David is. The area where the Milo is, the other archaeological stations, this was all underground. People were growing potatoes on the site where the city of David is today, and they had no idea that they are standing on thousands of years of history. It is only at the end of the 19th century, through people like Charles Warren, that we realized that under this pile of dirt, this pile of soil, there is a city underneath. And under the city, there is a complicated network of tunnels dating to Canaanite times. And today you can walk yourself those tunnels that date even before the time of David. This is me walking through the Canaanite tunnel. Now, before this was all discovered, the word Sinor didn't mean anything to anybody. Nobody knew there was a city like this, and nobody knew there was a network of tunnels under this city. So when people read words like Milo or Sinor, it didn't mean anything to them. And some said, well, it's a myth, why do you care? Well, they were wrong, really, really wrong, because discovery after discovery, the Bible proves to be a reliable source. For example, like this discovery, we are now in the location of the pool of Siloam, and they have just discovered a dam that was used for retaining water in this area. By the way, if you're interested, I have a tour of the whole city of David in 2 parts. I will leave links to those episodes in the description of this video. If you haven't seen them, I really recommend them. They're really interesting. So how did David's men conquer the city? Well, now I think it's quite clear. They used that Sino, that pipe, the tunnel, the same tunnels that the Canaanites used to gather the water from the Gihon spring and irrigate the Kidron Valley was used by David's men to enter the city and capture it for David. Before I continue the story, I want to share with you something amazing. So, the discovery of the city of David was one of the most important in Israel's history. It proved that the nation of Israel is connected to Jerusalem for thousands of years, showing that the stories of the Bible are not myths but a historical reality. But the battle for the memory is not over. Just as David once fought to rule Jerusalem, Israeli archaeologists today are fighting to uncover the past of their ancestors. In the very valley from which David conquered Jerusalem, history was once again unearthed, but this time through a tragedy. In 1999, the Islamic Waqf illegally dumped thousands of tons of Temple Mount soil into the Kidron Valley, soil rich with artifacts dating from the Canaanite period through the time of Jesus. But what seemed like a catastrophe became the largest archaeological rescue operation in history. Led by Dr. Gabriel Barkay of Bar Ilan University, volunteers have now recovered over 500,000 artifacts, bronze weapons from David's era, clay seals from the royal treasury, pottery from Solomon's temple. And guys, I have a good news for you. You can also join this battle for truth and memory. Because after the artifacts are preserved, the authenticated soil continues this mission, allowing people worldwide to own a piece of sacred history. That's right, guys, I'm not joking. You can have a piece of the most important soil from the Temple Mount in your house. Each piece is individually numbered and certified with a certificate of authenticity. By purchasing this soil, you are directly funding the ongoing rescue archaeology, helping the volunteers and archaeologists in Israel to uncover the truth. For more, visit templemountsoil.com. Link is in the description below. They have extensive information on the site about the sifting project and how your purchase directly supports the excavation. So guys, this is really a unique opportunity for you to own a piece of biblical history and join the mission for truth. Go to templemountsoil.com and order your piece of the Temple Mount soil. And by the way, they offer free shipping for orders in the United States. Continuing the story from the Bible, David is now a true king, and he begins his reign by renaming the city to the City of David. He also establishes international alliances, first with the king of Tyre, Hiram, who supplies David in the precious cedar wood. At that time, Tyre was an important port city, part of the Phoenician kingdom, and today located on the territory of Lebanon. But David wanted that good quality wood for the projects he has already planned in Jerusalem. And this is just a one-line information, but it becomes important in the light of discoveries made in the city of David. And we read he has done changes to the upper part of the city. In verse 9, we read that he began building from the Milo and inward. And now we know what Milo means, thanks to the discoveries in the city of David. So that's really helpful. So in the spot where the fortress of Zion could have been, David built his palace. And as you look at my model of the Palace of David, I want you to notice the columns, because I have designed them in a very specific way for a reason. And the reason is that they found such a looking pillar, which is a Phoenician style pillar capital that was found in the city of David, where it is believed that the palace of David stood. When I visit the city of David on my tour, I mention this column and show where it is located. So if you're interested, you can see the whole episode. A link will be in the description of this video, so make sure you check it out. So now this simple information in verse 11 sounds very different, right? We read that the king of Tyre, so from Phoenicia, sent messengers to David with cedar trees, carpenters, and stone masons, and they built a house for David. And then we find a pillar, a capital of a pillar, with a style very typical for Phoenician masons. Amazing. But that's why Jerusalem is such an amazing city, where the Bible speaks from every corner. You can just imagine David being there and looking over the city he has conquered, from the terrace of a new palace built by Phoenician masons. Anyways, we read that David took more wives and more concubines from Jerusalem when he started ruling there. So this is in addition to those wives he already had in Hebron. And here you can see a list of children that were born to him in Jerusalem, in the city of David. Man, David could have created another 12 tribes if he wanted. But if you won't remember all of them, that's okay. Just notice one of them, which becomes very important later, and that's Solomon. Out of all the children that David had, Solomon will be the one that will continue the legacy, expanding the city to the north, building magnificent buildings and palaces on the Ophel, and of course, having a temple dedicated to Adonai. But that's for another episode, so make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit that bell button so that you are notified when I'm gonna create the continuation to this episode. But now let's continue. So when the Philistines heard that David is the new king of Israel, they started mobilizing to counter this threat. So far, Israel was divided and not a big threat to the well-established Philistines in the valleys. But now it's a different story, so the Philistines reacted with force, gathering in the valley of Rephaim. David received a word from Adonai that he should attack them head-on, because the victory will be his. And so it was, the army of David broke through the army of the Philistines like you break through the waters. And so David called this place Bel Perazim, meaning Lord of Breakthroughs. But that was just the first battle. The Philistines didn't give up. They mobilized again and gathered again in the same valley of Rephaim. And David asked the Lord, should I attack them again head on? But the Lord said, no, you will circle them around and attack them from the Baca shrubs. The surprise attack by David gave him the decisive victory over the Philistines. David becomes the champion that always wins with the Philistines. This victory was very important. David defended his kingdom, but it was far from over. If you look at this map, you have the two cities mentioned in this verse. From Geba as far as Gezer. This is how much the territory of the Philistines shrinked due to this victory. But as you can see, there is still a lot to do. And this is of course not the end of David's rule. He will continue to fight the Philistines throughout this chapter. And we will certainly continue this story showing you the life of David on maps. As you probably imagine, creating such a video like you just saw requires a lot of work, a lot of dedication, a lot of time. I create the 3D models you see. I create special scripts where I determine certain behavior of animations. The map of the land of Israel was created by me, and that involved a lot of hours modeling, coloring, creating something that would look nice. The same with the model of the city of David and the animations that go into that. I created myself. So if you enjoy such work, if you think that it's valuable, I kindly ask you to support my work through Patreon or PayPal. Those are the best ways. I will leave links in the description. You know, there is a lot of AI going on recently. You see a lot of creations that are made by AI. Here, I create everything myself. I use some images sometimes to cut out certain images, but the models, everything is made by a human. So if you like that kind of creation, which is not made by AI, and you want to support somebody who's real, then I would be very, very thankful if you find the resources to do so. Of course, I love what I'm doing and I will continue to do so. So don't worry. If you can't support me, that's okay. You can always like the video, you can share the video. That is also a great help for me. Thank you so much for your attention. I wish you all the best. Shalom.